So this is probably one of the most important videos on this channel. While I was gathering materials for it and going over some things, I realized that Bill Gates' predictions for 2024 about AI agents in the future are truly amazing. A lot of the things he talks about I hadn't thought of before. So I'm going to talk about 10 different things related to AI agents in 2024 and beyond, exactly what Bill Gates has said and how they're going to change our future. Trust me, there are some really important predictions that I think you'll want to understand. Afterwards, the first thing he talks about is that you need to pay attention now. Of course, this doesn't apply to you as much because you're someone that currently testing one is actually on the AI side of the internet, which means you're interacting with artificial intelligence content, you're watching it, consuming it, and probably realizing the monumental change that is coming. Other people have seen it too, but not many have. According to Bill Gates, there are frequently many changes in the early stages of a new era. This is true if you're old enough to remember the start of the internet. At first, you probably didn't know many people who were using it, but as time went on, it became more common until you realized most people had email addresses, bought things online, and used search engines to find answers to their questions. So it's definitely something you should pay attention to because it's really important not to just stick your head in the sand. And when I say stick your head in the sand, I mean just ignore it. It means to put your head in the sand and say, you know what, nothing's happening. Bill Gates also says that we are just at the start of this transition. He says that it is an exciting and confusing time. And if you haven't figured out how to make the best use of AI yet, you're not alone. So this year, I decided to use tools for the foundation strategy reviews, which require reading hundreds of pages of briefing materials that an AI could accurately summarize for me. But old habits are hard to break. And I ended up preparing them the same way I always do. So he's basically talking about how these AI systems can be used to summarize documents. For example, Claude and ChatGPT can do that. But he's also talking about doing things the old way, like with this channel. For example, you could have an AI voice or an AI script, but I still like to do things the old-fashioned way. Will that change in the future for other industries and people? That's something we'll talk about later in the video. But the point he's trying to make here is that we are in a transitional period where things are about to change, and we're about to see that rapid super takeoff like a plane, just, the plane slowly taking off, and we're still a long way from the top. One of the things he talks about is how AI is about to speed up the innovation pipeline. He says that his work has always been about, and since the beginning, I've believed that innovation is the key to success. That's why I started Microsoft and why Melinda and I started the Gates Foundation more than 20 years ago. Innovation is what has made our lives so much better over the last 100 years, from electricity and cars to medicine and planes. It has made the world a much better place today. Thanks to the IT revolution, we are much more productive, and innovation is what drives the most prosperous economies. EV claimed that new industries would be created to meet the needs of a changing world. What he's basically saying is that AI is going to not only make us more productive, but it's also going to give us a supercharged innovation pipeline for ideas, research, and everything else. The first thing he talks about is how vaccine innovation helped cut childhood deaths in half. You can see that the number of children who die every year has gone down from 10 million to about 5 million. This is due to new vaccines, new delivery systems, and new ways to make vaccines with AI. In fact, I think there was a research paper yesterday where I was used again to find a way to stop an antibiotic-resistant strain of bacteria that was killing about 10,000 people a year. Last year, I was able to find a cure for that. So as I said, if we can get new vaccines, new ways to deliver vaccines, and new ways to make sure that all vaccines are given consistently with AI, deep learning, and other types of AI, it will definitely take things to a whole new level. You can see that he was talking about one of the biggest effects so far on finding huge amounts of data is needed to find new medicines, and AI can speed up the process by a lot. So some companies are already working on cancer drugs that were made this way, but the Gates Foundation wants to make sure that all of these tools also help solve health problems that affect the world's poorest regions the most. This is what companies are trying to do. There's some countries that are disproportionately poor and less economically developed and don't have the infrastructure or teams to do all of this research. That's why we want to speed up the process so that we can focus on the health problems that are happening in those countries instead of the ones that are happening here, like drug abuse and AIDS. Malaria and HIV are two diseases that some of the poorest countries suffer from. So, of course, AI innovation will speed those up a lot, which will have a big effect on all of us. Now there was another crazy thing here. And I didn't really miss this document because I'm usually on the same page for everything R related. But of course, some things are going to miss you. But A shocking prediction he made was that in high-income countries like the U.S., he thought that significant levels of AI use by the general population would not happen for 18 to 24 months. In African countries, he thought that the same level of use would happen in about 3 years. That's still a gap, but it's much shorter than the gaps we've seen in other innovations. For example, he thought that this would happen it's like the birth of the internet when it took off and a lot of people started using it. But the thing about the internet is that it wasn't expensive. It was just a slow rollout because you had to put up the cables. Computers were also expensive, so not everyone could afford one. But 18 to 24 months away is just like, we all know that time goes by quickly. You blink and it's already the end of the year 2024. I'm sure that this year went by quickly for many people, and this keeps happening as you get older. So in the next 2 years, you can expect a lot of people to use AI. But you might be thinking, I don't use AI. I'm not going to use it. Not to use AI at all. Keep in mind that a lot of it runs systems you don't even know about. For example, if you use social media, AI is running the system behind the scenes, and all of these recommendation algorithms are AI-driven. It's not like a person, because even though you follow some people on social media, most of what you do is browse, whether it's TikTok, Instagram, or Twitter. People usually want to watch videos on twitter.com or even YouTube when they go to your homepage. This is where he goes into more detail, and he does say that AI is about to completely change how people use computers. Of course, this is just a prediction, but I think it's a pretty good one because, as I said before, I haven't seen many people talk about this. I did talk about a bit in the 2024 AI video, but this goes into a lot more detail and explains things a lot more thoroughly. One thing he says is that this pretty much explains how we use computers. You have to tell your device which app to use. For example, you can use Microsoft Word or Google Docs to write a business proposal, but they can't help you send an email, share a selfie, or analyze data. Planning a party or buying movie tickets is hard because even the best sites don't fully understand your work, personal life interests, and relationships, and they can't fully use this information to do things for you. That's something that can only be done today with a person like a close friend or personal assistant. But in 5 years, after these 2 years where everyone's using AI, okay, we're going to have agents that work like Siri on steroids. Instead of using different apps for different tasks, we'll just tell our devices what we want to do in everyday language, depending on how much information we give them. The software will be able to respond personally because it will have a rich understanding of your life. This is true because if you think about it this way, we'll all have Paspio. Their Inflection 2 model is said to be even bigger than the EGT4, but we won't know for sure until later versions. Inflection 2 is good, but I haven't seen that many people using it, and I'm not sure what devices it's on. So the point is that this is going to change how we interact with each other, as an analogy, because you can just tell your computer, hey, I need to make a video about this. Can you go to this article and grab these links? Can you put it into a document and then do this? Can you add this music? That's a big improvement over using your keyboard and mouse and scrolling around. Even on your phone, if you want to set an alarm, Siri will be there for you. Siri, that was 100% accurate, knew everything about your life, and knew all the things you needed to do would be really useful. So he talks about how agents are going to change not only how people use computers, but also the software industry, bringing about the biggest change in computing since he switched from typing commands to tapping on icons. Of course, this is something you already know. That he wrote about in his 1995 book called The Road Ahead. He talked about agents for almost 30 years, and some of the things he talked about are probably going to come true now because of how far AI has come. One of the AI agents he talks about is Clippy, who was a digital assistant, but he was one of the first well-known ones. I don't think he was that great, but he wasn't that bad either. It was more of a Microsoft Office gimmick. So as he says, some people have pointed out that software companies have offered similar features before and users didn't really take to them. That's why people make jokes about Clippy, but why would people use agents if they haven't used them before? My thing, though, you're a martial art, you'll be able to have more complex conversations with them, and they won't just be able to do simple things like write letters. You know, Clippy has a lot more in common with an agent's rotary phone than it does with a mobile device. So what he's saying here is that Clippy was just, what if people didn't use Clippy? Why would they use agents? This level of technology is completely different. I've used ChatGPT with voice, and it's great. If you haven't used ChatGPT with voice before, I would suggest that you do so if you want to talk to Chat about brainstorming ideas while you're driving, cooking, or whatever. Own brainstorming ideas and just asking about certain things is really interesting. I was surprised at how good it was. The only thing I would say isn't so great is that there are delays with ChatGPT when you're talking to it. So it's not as realistic as if a real person responded right away. But the latency problems are being fixed, and we are getting local models that are much smaller, more efficient, and better. Right now, GPT-4 is definitely running on some kind of huge server where they want to serve everyone, so they do have trouble fulfilling all of the requests. That's why they have limits. Like, you can only send about 40 messages every 3 hours or so. They talk about how clippy it is. To see how agents will make a big difference, let's look at the AI tools that are already out there. And most of these are bots that can only work in one app and usually only help you write a word or ask for help because they forget how you use them from time to time and don't get better or learn your preferences. Clippy was an example of this. Agents are going to do much better than bots. Be proactive and able to make suggestions before you even ask for them. They can do tasks across multiple applications and get better over time because they remember your activities and can read your intent and pattern of behavior. Based on this information, they can give you what you think you need and always help you make final decisions. You know it's going to be a revolution because even though people can get personal help now, everyone is more productive when there is a level playing field. We also saw something similar because if you watched yesterday's video, we talked about Project Sunshine Chat GPT's secret upgrade. The next feature we know is on the way. Some of it wasn't leaked. It was in the source code, like in the JavaScript on the website. You can find it yourself. As I said, this was written in November, so we know that stuff is going to be there. It's just a matter of when. It gives us example. Let's say you want to plan a trip. TravelBot will find hotels that fit your budget. An agent will know what time of year you'll be traveling and whether you'll try it. It will be able to suggest new destinations and things to do based on your interests and willingness to try new things. It will also be able to book restaurants and reservations at the kinds of restaurants you'd like, so it's like deeply specialized, personalized planning. Of course, PA could do this, but imagine asking about to plan your vacation when it already knows what you're interested in. Well, it's going to be interesting because AI agents will change other things as well as people. If they change people, they will change other things because they change how we use technology, which changes how we use other things. Businesses have to adapt and change, which means the economy and other things will be changing. That's why I said this was so interesting. I mean, it made me think about things I hadn't really thought about before. Video shows that AI agents will be bigger than you think if they are accurate, which I think they will be in 5 years. So it's crazy how fast things are changing. I've been reading research papers, so this is where we have healthcare. He talks about how today's AI's main job in healthcare is to help with boring administrative tasks. As for example, these apps can record audio during an appointment and then write up notes for the doctor to look over. He says the real change will happen when agents can help patients go through basic triage, get advice on how to deal with health problems, and decide if they need to get treatment. These agents will also help healthcare workers make better decisions and be more productive. Scrubbing patients and healthcare workers will be especially helpful for people in poor countries where many people never get to see a doctor at all. So this is not only really, I don't know how many people live in the UK or the US, but I do know that in the US, if you don't have health insurance, some things can get worse than if you just went to the doctor. Also, I know that in the UK, the GP system isn't very good. Unless you have private healthcare, it can take up to it takes weeks to see a doctor, which isn't good. Of course, if you have a personalized eye system, like something that's cheaply run on a device, I'm sure these systems will work much better than just waiting around to find out what's wrong or having someone nervously scroll the internet and then think they have a 10 times worse condition than they do. That's exactly what it is, because there was something pretty crazy that happened. I'm going to show you something on Twitter in a moment, but before I do that, helping patients and healthcare workers will be especially helpful for people in poor countries, where many people never get to see a doctor at all. So there will definitely be an AI that is trained on vision and will be available locally. Maybe it'll be a $10 billion model that's trained on certain things. Like at Dr. GB, we've already seen things like a Dr. Claude, which was a fine-tuned version of Claude made for doctors and students. And then there's MedGB, which we all have, 90 on tests and other things like that. So I think this information is better than none, and being able to talk to an AI that's specifically trained to help you with your healthcare, one that knows your age, height, and weight. Because if you're having a health problem right now and you Google, okay, my hand turned blue, that doesn't take into account the fact that you might be a man. All of that information is lost if you don't have your own AI system or can put that information into one that has already seen millions of things. It will work much better if it's automated, like I said, and if it's running all the time. This is crazy. A random person on Twitter probably just saved someone's life. There was a tweet from this guy that said, I've been sitting at my desk all day, and all of a sudden, while on the back-tack Zoom call, my ankle starts throbbing with pain, swelling up huge, and turning a weird color. How did I badly spray my ankle on the Zoom call? I can't even walk. That doesn't make sense. I mean, that sounds like a blood clot. Go to the ARIS app. Note, I'm a former 911 paramedic. So this guy, former 911 paramedic, basically says, look, I'm lucky I saw this tweet because I'm telling you to go to the EA. Now you need to see the... You might be wondering what this has to do with ChatGPT. Well, I asked ChatGPT what they would do based on the following information. You can see what ChatGPT said here. Given the information and carefully considering all the possibilities, I would prioritize deep vein thrombosis as a condition to consider first, especially since it can happen without any obvious injury. It is a potentially life-threatening condition that needs immediate medical attention, which basically explains why this is the case and why they need to get treatment as soon as possible. Gauss did that with GBT4, so this is what I'm saying. GBTF4 got it right. Now, I'm not saying that you should always use GP4 to diagnose yourself, but this guy wouldn't have lived if he hadn't used GP4 and then gone to the emergency room. That's the point I'm trying to make here, guys. This stuff has applications than you think, and I wouldn't be surprised if we got a localized version of this website. Of course, there will be times when people are upset because they were wrongly diagnosed. I think all we need is a robot that's better than humans to the point where it's more effective, which is what we really want because it's what's best. Also, there's mental health, which I talked about in another video. Half of all us veterans who need mental health care don't get it, and an AI agent that is well-trained in mental health will make therapy much cheaper and easier to get. So keep in mind that this is going to be an AI agent that does things for you and stuff like that. It will be able to talk to you in natural language, so it won't just be a chatbot. It will use things like really nice speech and stuff like that, so it will sound like a person and speak quickly. You'll be amazed at how useful this technology will be in a couple of years. For example, if you give a mental health agent enough information, they will be able to understand your life story. How good your relationships will be there for you when you need them, and they won't get impatient. It could even, with your permission, track your physical responses to therapy through your smartwatch. For example, if your heart starts racing while you're talking about a problem with your boss, it could tell you that you need to see a real therapist. I mean, that kind of stuff is going to be crazy. I wouldn't be surprised if we have things like an Aura. Mine basically just tracks your sleep. But I wouldn't be surprised if you got a more advanced Apple Watch with some kind of system that talks to you about your health and asks things like, is everything okay? Do you need me to call 9,911? Or I can see that your health is just going down. Has it been something you started eating? I can order this for you. It is just a huge step forward in terms of technology and healthcare, especially for mental health. You'd be surprised at how much information can really change someone's life once they have access to it, which is why I said that these AI agents are going to change everything. In this section, he talks about how AI can make it easier for all healthcare workers to access medical information, which I think is really interesting. He also talks about how AI could fight antibiotic resistance, which I thought was funny because the next day, a week after he wrote this, there was already an AI that could do that. We also talk about education, which I didn't do myself. Or consider that. And I'd also like to show you a clip of some people talking at MICU. It was really interesting, and they talked about some really interesting ideas because when we think about AI, we often think AI is going to take away everything. It's going to do this. It's going to do that. I think that unless you're an expert in the field, it's hard to see how get back to you because it's really eye-opening about how AI is going to change education. Some of you may not be in it right now, but it's still important to see how it interacts with technologies in ways you didn't think about. It used to be smart to ask them to solve math problems before calculators came along. It used to be smart to ask them to translate documents from one language to another before Google Translate came along. As a result, schools have had to deal with tools for decades that let people avoid useful cognition. Then schools have to figure out what they don't need to do, like what kinds of, I don't know, a student told me when I asked them what they were using ChatGPT, I think it was a year ago, they said it was to format and launch my papers. I told them, great, don't think about that again, because if a machine can do that for you, that's not useful cognition. But there are other things we ask students to write, not just to make a document, but because writing is thinking, and skipping that process may be skipping useful cognition. So we need to go back. Math teachers quickly learned that you can't ban these technologies. They also learned that sometimes it was a good idea to block these things off and say, you should be able to do this without a calculator, because you won't be able to do later types of math thinking if you don't have these kinds of skills down pat. So don't use those tools for this part of the lesson this week or for homework. We'll figure out where to bring them later. That's the most important thing I think school leaders are working on right now, and I'm sure we can help them think through those kinds of problems. A big part of that will be continuing to think of fun ways to have people do useful thinking. That can't be done in a traditional way. That being said, they need to figure out how to do useful code without using Spark Notes, without using calculators, and all of these other things. I think the next thing they need to do is figure out how to change their schools based on what they should be teaching differently. Mitch brought up an example, which is that many effective schools do, like Levy, David Artur, and Richard Randall did work in the economics department that said if a computer is good at something, then you might want to think carefully about whether you want to spend a lot of time teaching humans how to do that thing because they probably can't get a lot of practice. But there are a lot of things that computers, and I might not be as good at. I should figure out what those are and really try to focus on skill development in those areas. Mitch gave me a pretty good list of some of those things. Also, I hope that clip helped you out a bit. If I could include it, I would. AGI Calvin Math, and at the decades, I've been excited about all the ways that software would make teachers' jobs easier, help students learn. Of course, it won't replace teachers, but it will help them do their jobs better by customizing work for each student and freeing teachers from paperwork and other boring tasks. Now, I'm not sure if you watched that clip where they talk about just lowering the cognitive load or just basically, I think this example is really cool. He says that few families can afford a tutor who works one-on-one with a student to help them with their schoolwork. If AI agents can figure out what makes a good tutor, they'll make the extra help available to everyone who wants it. For example, if an AI agent knows that a kid likes Minecraft by Taylor Swift, it will use Minecraft to teach them about Taylor Swift. They can learn about storytelling and rhyme schemes from Taylor Swift's lyrics, and the experience will be much richer with graphics and sound, for example, and more personalized than today's text-based shooter. I think that kind of stuff is really creative, and I wouldn't be surprised if it happens, because if an AI agent can figure out what you're interested in, it will be better and more equipped than a regular teacher would be able to do that with you. But I'm talking about personalized tutoring, not like a teacher in the classroom. I don't think it will replace teachers, but it will definitely be very useful. He then says that the AI education tools being developed today are mind-blowing because they are made to fit the needs of each individual learner, which is important because everyone learns differently. Personalized a tutor that will improve your education, which will improve your effectiveness, which will increase your productivity, which will boost the economy as a whole. There is already a lot of competition in this field. Microsoft is adding Copilot to Word, Excel, Outlook, and other services, and Google is doing the same thing with Assistant. These Copilots can do a lot of things, like, I can turn a written document into a slideshow, answer questions about a spreadsheet in natural language, and summarize email threads while showing each person's point of view. This is where he talks about having agents, so it will be like having one person help you with different tasks and doing them on their own if you want them to. Remember that agents can go off on their own and do things if you want them to? Later in the video, I'll show you guys some serious questions we need to ask about agents because they were things I had never thought of before. So, yeah, basically, agent productivity does make you really, really productive. For example, if your friend just had surgery, your agent will offer to send flowers and be able to order them for you, so it's going to be able to go on. Check out your Amazon apps to find good flowers, read your messages, see what you and your friend talked about, and suggest stuff. It's going to be crazy. For example, if you tell it to meet up with an old college roommate, it will work with their agent to find a time, and before you get there, it will remind you of anything you know about them. That's why I said it was crazy how useful this is going to be. Some people will choose not to use them, which I guess could be seen as a philosophical question. It says that I can already help you choose a new TV and suggest movies, which is something I've talked about before. And it also mentions a company that I recently invested in, Bill Gates, not me. Pick is a new app that lets you ask questions like, what Robert Redford movies do you like? And where can I watch them? And then make suggestions based on what you liked before. And Spotify has an air-powered DJ. Says to not only play songs based on your taste, but also talks to you and can even call you by name. I don't think this is that crazy, but what he talks about is a little crazy. You'll also be able to get news, and AI, which makes custom podcasts about any topic you ask about, is a sneak peek at what's to come. I think we may be entering an era where we do get AI-generated entertainment. If you don't know what I'm talking about, think of the interdimensional cable from Rick and Morty. Guys, you could immediately describe every version of every universe you could ever imagine. For example, in the TV show, Rick and Morty, they want to watch an episode where people are pizzas or something like that. I'm not sure if that's the exact episode, but the point is that anything you can imagine could be turned into a TV show because you get an AI agent to use Midjourney for images and make it happen. That's a text for a video, and of course you could get soundtracks with AI. You can get voices with 11 Labs. That level of creation will be there, and there will be systems that can do it for you. Also, Netflix looked into AI-generated TV shows. So if you haven't seen Black Mirror yet, you should because it has a lot of... there is some futuristic stuff in there. but it's more realistic in terms of what could really happen. If you watch this channel, you should definitely check it out because it's great for looking at problems we won't have seen before. What we also want to talk about is the shock to the tech industry. So basically, you need to know that agents are going to be the next platform. Agents will be the next platform, just like Android, iOS, and Wint any app or service. You'll basically just tell your agent what you want. We already know about one-click websites and web pages, so having an agent that can act as you means that you can just tell your agent what you want and they will write the code, design the app's look and feel, make a logo, and so on. And they can already publish an app to an online store and open a GPT offer. This gives us a taste of what we'll be able to see in the future, where non-developers will be able to easily make and share their own help. As I said before, it levels the playing field. Of course, there is an advanced area where you can use APIs, callbacks, and other things like that, but it still levels the playing field in some ways. That's something I hadn't thought of before, and it's definitely crazy when you think about how innovative and high-quality products we'll be getting. Venture sample, this part says that agents will change how we use software and how it's written, so instead of searching for things, they'll be better at finding information and summarizing it for you. This is something we've already talked about. It's going to replace a lot of e-commerce sites because they'll find you the best price. Instead of searching for the best shoes online, you'll just ask the AI agent to find them for you, and it will do it in about 5 seconds. It's also going to replace word processors, spreadsheets, and other productivity apps because businesses today separate search advertising from advertising on social networks. As I said, shopping will become a business. So AI agents will definitely be needed. I think it will change a lot, especially if they're really good at what they do. He also says that he doesn't think one company will dominate the agent's business. There will be many AI engines to choose from, and of course, OpenAI is at the front of the pack. Many companies will likely come out and beat them, and he does say that there will be a lot of competition, which will make AI agents very cheap. Of course, we need to ask a lot of questions about this technology, but this is just about AI agent technology. For example, privacy is a big issue, so he asks, who owns the data that you share with your agent, and how do you make sure that it's being used correctly? No one wants to start seeing ads related to something they told their therapist agent. Can the police use your agent as evidence against you? When will your agent refuse to do something that could hurt you or someone else? And who decides what values are built into agents? For example, will an agent help you write an essay about something controversial? To make a business that you know might be a little unethical, because we all know that some businesses are. I wouldn't say that all of them are unethical. Depending on your point of view, you might think that they are. For example, companies that break the law by exploiting workers or hiring ears to help you build your business might not be seen as ethical. Should be doing, like, who decides what values are built into agents, and are there companies that let you make agents that will do anything? There are a lot of questions. There's also the question of how much your agent should share. For example, should your agent give too much information? For example, you don't want your agent to say she's seeing a doctor among other friends on Tuesday, but doesn't want to include you. If your AI agent helps you write emails for work, it will need to know that it shouldn't use personal information about you or proprietary data from a previous job. As I said, this is something we need to think about in terms of how these agents are deployed, how they're integrated, and how they work. It's going to be crazy. We change how we interact with our friends and family today. You can show someone you care by remembering details about their life, but does it mean the same thing if they know that your agent is likely to remind you? And for example, when someone cares about you, you remember their birthday and other things about them. But if it's just your agent doing all the work, does that still mean something? These are the kinds of questions and issues we'll have to deal with. And then there's this one. I was reading this and thinking, this is so true. In the far future, agents may even force people to think deeply about their purpose. Imagine that agents get so good that everyone can have a great life without having to work nearly as much. What would people do in that kind of future? Would anyone want to go to school when an agent already knows everything? Is it possible to live in a safe and prosperous society where most people have a lot of free time? These are all very important questions. Do we live in a place where everyone is free to do what they want? Will people just get into trouble because they have money? People have money because of UBI and AGI. Agents, yeah, what would people do with their time? Does anyone even want to go to school? What's the point? Like I said, a lot of questions are coming up, and we need to answer them and see how things are affected. As I've always said, any change in technology has pros and cons. So, for example, social media makes people more connected, but it also makes you less focused. On the downside, it can lead to depression and a bunch of other crazy mental health problems. It can also cause addiction to dopamine and other things like that, as well as problems with like productivity and other things like that. It will be interesting to see how things change in the next 5 years or 18 to 12 months if they do